remember the day. I was fired as if it were yesterday. I entered a bright modern boardroom where executives sat silently, waiting. Mia Lane, with a cold, determined gaze, announced my dismissal without remorse, offering no severance pay. That moment sparked a burning desire for justice. My name is Ben Stone. I believe in fairness and hard work. I have given my all to this company, yet they treated me as if I meant nothing. Being fired was a deep betrayal, but it also lit a fire inside me. I knew I would not let this injustice stand. I walked out of that boardroom with a calm smile on my face, a smile that held a secret promise. As I stepped into the cool corridor, I could still hear the hushed whispers of the board members behind me. Their disbelief and shock only fueled the fire burning inside me. I had given my all to this company, and now I was cast aside as if I meant nothing. Yet, deep within, I knew this was not the end. Every step I took away from that room was filled with a quiet resolve. I recalled all the long hours, the hard work, and the loyalty I had shown. All that effort was now turned against me by people who had never cared about my dreams. That cold dismissal was a betrayal that cut deep, but it also lit a spark within me. I vowed that the injustice I suffered would not go unanswered. I began to think back on the days when I worked side by side with my colleagues, believing that fairness and commitment would always win out. Instead, I was treated like a burden, a piece of equipment to be discarded when I was no longer useful. But as I walked, my thoughts turned into plans. I knew that I had a secret advantage, a power that no one in that room could imagine. They thought I was just an ordinary employee, someone easily replaced. Little did they know, I held a stake in this company, a stake that gave me true power, hidden behind layers of careful planning and quiet determination. I had prepared for a day like this. Today was the day when I would start to reclaim what was mine, and I would do it my own way. My heart pounded as I stepped into the long, empty corridor. The cool air seemed to whisper promises of revenge. I felt both sadness for the loss of what I believed in, and a rising strength that told me this was only the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I resolved to use this betrayal as the fuel for my own comeback, a comeback that would bring justice to those who thought they could break me. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I would gather the truth, build my case, and expose the corruption that had led to my dismissal. I would prove that every act of injustice, every harsh word, and every cold order had sown the seeds of my eventual rise. The journey ahead would be tough, but I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. As I left that fateful day behind, I felt the weight of betrayal lift ever so slightly, replaced by a steady, unyielding determination. I knew my path would be long and full of challenges, but I was prepared to step into the unknown, armed with the burning desire for justice. And so my story, my true story of retribution, began that day, setting me on a course from which I could never turn back. I can still remember the early days when I first joined this company. Back then, I believed in the promise of hard work and fairness. I poured my heart into every project and stayed loyal, even when no one noticed. I watched as my ideas helped drive small successes, and I felt proud to be a part of something bigger than myself. But over time, I began to see a darker side, a legacy built on injustice and exploitation. I recall many moments when my efforts went unnoticed. My bright ideas were used by others to gain favor with those in power. I worked long hours and sacrificed my personal time, only to be treated as if I were disposable. My loyalty was taken for granted, and my achievements were claimed by those who did not deserve them. Every day I saw my passion and dedication slowly turn into frustration and sadness. In those difficult times, one person always stood by my side, a mentor who became like a father to me. His name was Tom Hayes. Tom was a wise and gentle man who had helped build the very foundation of this company. He had once been a rising star, respected for his integrity and vision. I looked up to him, and he taught me that true success was not just about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about staying true to your values, Tom's guidance made me believe that hard work and honesty would always be rewarded. However, as the years passed, I watched with a heavy heart as the company's legacy, once built on dreams and hope, became tainted by greed and corruption. I saw how the leaders, who should have honored the sacrifices made by loyal workers, began to exploit every opportunity for personal gain. The very values that Tom had instilled in me were being discarded by those in power. It hurt to see the legacy of hard work turn into a tool for selfish ambition. I remember one particularly painful day when my ideas were stolen during a crucial meeting. I had worked on a project for months, and when I presented my findings, the applause that followed was not for me, but for someone else. That moment broke my heart. I realized then that I was not seen as a valuable person, but merely as an expendable tool in their grand design. It was a clear sign of the injustice that had taken root in this place. That day, as I walked away from the meeting in silence, a deep promise formed in my heart. I vowed that I would never allow myself to be a victim again. I would learn from these wounds and let them fuel a fire inside me, a fire of determination to bring justice to all those who had been wronged. I resolved that one day I would use every lesson I had learned to reclaim my dignity and restore the true legacy of this company. Tom Hayes, my mentor, had always believed that every injustice could be corrected. His words echoed in my mind. "Stand tall, Ben. Never let them take your honor." Even though I was hurt, I clung to his advice as a beacon of hope. I knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. Now, as I remember these early days of exploitation and injustice, I feel the weight of my past fueling my resolve. I may have been hurt and betrayed, but I have grown stronger with each setback. The legacy of injustice has planted a seed within me, a seed that will one day bloom into the sweetest revenge. I am determined to honor the memory of those who believed in me and to rebuild this company on the principles of fairness and respect. And so my journey of revenge and renewal truly begins. I could still feel the sting of my dismissal as I observed the new world that had taken over the company. The boardroom, once cold and silent after my exit, was now filled with laughter and self-congratulation. I had heard whispers of a celebration among the new leaders, a lavish party in a bright modern office where they praised themselves for cutting costs and boosting efficiency. They boasted about firing me and others, claiming that their ruthless measures had saved the company. I learned that Mia Lane, the woman who had so callously dismissed me, now ruled this new era with an iron fist. The office was grand and extravagant, with expensive furniture and sparkling lights that shone on every polished surface. In the center of it all, Mia stood proud and confident, dressed in a sharp suit that reflected her ambition. I could almost see the pride in her eyes as she spoke to her loyal aides, declaring her new policies and celebrating the efficiency they had gained by cutting all extra costs, severance pay included. During one of the meetings, I managed to overhear a conversation. Mia was laughing and saying, "We have finally rid ourselves of dead weight. Cutting costs has not only saved us money, but has made our company lean and strong." The tone in her voice was full of arrogance. To her, firing me was nothing more than a smart business move. They did not see me as a person with worth or dreams. Instead, I was just a number, a cost to be eliminated. While they celebrated their victory, I sat quietly in the shadows, listening to their boastful chatter. I felt a deep anger mixed with determination. They thought I was an ordinary, replaceable employee. They had no idea that the storm of retribution was already gathering strength. I had learned to hide my true feelings, but inside, I was planning my comeback. Their arrogance was their weakness, and I was ready to use that against them. I remember one moment clearly. I was standing in a quiet corridor of the building, and I heard one of the board members, a man whose voice trembled with false confidence. "To know us with these changes, our profits will soar, and nothing can stop us now." That voice echoed in my mind. I knew that while they celebrated in their lavish office, their self-satisfaction was blinding them to the damage they had done. They were so wrapped up in their own success that they had no clue of the plans I was making behind their backs. Every word they spoke confirmed what I had always known. Their actions were not about progress or fairness, but about personal gain and power. They had built a regime that valued profit over people, and in doing so, they had planted the seed of their own downfall. I realized that their celebration was short-lived. The day would come when the truth would expose their corruption, and their arrogance would turn against them. Even as I listened, I silently vowed that I would not let their tyranny continue. I would gather evidence, find allies among the betrayed, and work to dismantle the corrupt system piece by piece. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but every slight they committed fueled my determination. I would show them that true strength comes from fairness and honor, not from cold, ruthless ambition. I walked away from that overheard conversation with a clear mind and a steady heart. Their arrogance had blinded them to the brewing storm, a storm that I was determined to unleash. And so, in the silence of the empty corridors, I made my quiet promise. One day soon, their time of unchecked power would end, and justice would be served. I have always believed that true power can come from unexpected places. After my dismissal, and watching the arrogant celebrations in that lavish office, I knew I had to act. What they never suspected was that I had a hidden talent that went far beyond my work at the company. While they measured success with boardroom meetings and financial reports, I had mastered the art of digital warfare. Today, I would use that skill to fight back. That night, I left the cold corridors of the office building and made my way to a small room I had prepared in secret. The room was dimly lit, with only a few candles flickering on a desk crowded with multiple computer screens. The soft, warm light of the candles mixed with the cool glow of the monitors, creating an atmosphere that was both mysterious and determined. Here, in this sanctuary of technology, I felt free to be myself, a silent warrior armed with nothing but keystrokes. I sat down and took a deep breath. I knew that with every click I was about to change the course of my fate, and the fate of this company. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to unleash a storm of digital moves that would shake the very foundation of the corrupt regime. I began by logging into the company's financial system, a system that Mia Lane and her allies believed was under their full control. Slowly, methodically, I navigated through layers of security and hidden folders. With each step, I uncovered evidence of fraud and corruption. My eyes scanned rows of financial data, and I found discrepancies that confirmed my worst suspicions. The company's funds had been manipulated, key deals were reversed without explanation, and large sums of money were being diverted into unknown accounts. I started by canceling deals that had been made in haste. I reversed transactions that had drained the company's resources. Every keystroke felt like a small victory in my silent coup. I carefully moved funds back to their rightful accounts and set up automated alerts to track any further attempts at mismanagement. I was not only punishing those who had betrayed me, but also protecting the company's true value. As I worked, the room was filled only with the quiet hum of the computers and the occasional flicker of the candlelight. There was no chaos, only the steady rhythm of my determined actions. I could almost hear the distant echoes of those boardroom voices, unaware that their empire was slowly crumbling from within. My mind was focused entirely on the task at hand, rebalancing the scales of justice, one digital strike at a time. Made sure to document every move I made. I saved copies of the corrected transactions and stored them securely, knowing that one day they would serve as evidence of the betrayal that had taken place. With each reversal, I felt the sting of injustice, ease slightly, replaced by a growing sense of power. I was rewriting the company's future with every click, and I knew that soon everyone would see the truth. By the time the candles had burned low, I had accomplished more than I ever imagined. I had not only disrupted the corrupt financial system, but also sent a clear message. I was back, and I would not be underestimated. This was a duel without swords, a battle fought with precision, determination, and the power of technology. I had struck silently and swiftly, and now the seeds of retribution were firmly planted. As I shut down the computers and blew out the last candle, I knew that this digital coup was only the beginning. The corrupt leadership would soon realize that their arrogance had blinded them to the true power hidden in their midst, and when they did, they would find that I was already one step ahead. In that quiet, candlelit room, I embraced my new role, not just as a wronged employee, but as a silent warrior ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. After I began my digital coup, I knew that the next step was to expose the deep corruption at the heart of the company. Even as I quietly rebalanced financial data and reversed secret transactions, I reached out to my trusted ally, Tom Hayes. Tom had been with the company for many years and had seen the very best and worst of its leadership. He was one of the few who still believed in fairness and honesty, and I knew he would not stand by while Mia Lane and her corrupt team continued their rule. Late one evening, I received an urgent message from Tom. He wrote, "Ben, I have gathered evidence of Mia's fraud and abuse. I am sending it to the press right away. We cannot let this continue." His words filled me with a mix of relief and anticipation. Tom had risked everything to leak the documents, copies of contracts, hidden memos, and bank records that clearly showed how funds were being misused. I had known the truth for some time, but now the evidence was out there, ready to shatter the false image Mia had built. The very next day, the media caught wind of the story. Headlines blared phrases like, "Corporate corruption exposed" and "New leadership under fire." Reporters hungry for a scandal swarmed our company's headquarters. Investors who had once supported Mia's leadership now began questioning every decision, every deal. Rumors of fraud and abuse spread like wildfire. In offices, in break rooms, and even in the quiet corners of the company corridors, whispers of chaos began to stir. I could feel the tension building as I walked through the hallways. People spoke in hushed tones, glancing nervously at one another. Even the board members who had once defended Mia with blind loyalty now looked over their shoulders and exchanged worried looks. The once confident facade of the new leadership was crumbling, and the sound of whispered conversations filled the air. Every remark about hidden evidence or secret deals was like a drumbeat signaling that change was coming. At first, Mia Lane tried to dismiss the allegations. In a hastily arranged press conference, she declared that the accusations were baseless and designed to undermine our progress. But the facts were undeniable. The leaked documents had spread. Too far and too fast. Investors began pulling their money, and public trust started to waver. The storm of media frenzy had taken hold, and it was only a matter of time before the full force of truth hit. In the midst of all this chaos, I felt a calm determination. I knew that the information Tom had risked his career to provide was the key to dismantling the corruption that had long ruled our company. I began to see that every whisper in the hall, every anxious glance, was part of a larger picture, the gathering storm of justice. Every time I heard someone mention the leaked evidence, I felt the weight of the past wrongs I had suffered transform into a driving force for change. I listened to the news reports and read the headlines, and I knew that soon, the entire company would be forced to confront the reality of Mia Lane's ruthless rule. I also understood that this was only the beginning. The public outrage and investor panic were clear signs that the tide was turning. The corporate empire built on deception was starting to crumble, and I was determined to see it through. The whispers of chaos echoed through the corridors of power, promising that the battle for justice was about to intensify. With each passing moment, the evidence grew louder than the lies, and the storm of truth became unstoppable. I could feel the momentum building, a momentum that would ultimately force every corrupt decision into the light. I had reached a point where I knew that uncovering every secret was essential to bring down the corrupt leadership. While I had already begun to weaken their financial system, I realized that the final blow would come from gathering even more sensitive evidence. This meant I needed to get closer to the source, right into the company's IT department. I decided to go undercover. Every day, I would play the part of an ordinary, overlooked employee, keeping my head down and doing my work. But when night fell, I would slip into a new identity, a hidden hacker working quietly in the shadows. I created a disguise that made me look like just another IT technician, someone who blended in without drawing attention. During the day, I appeared as Ben Stone, a quiet, hard-working man who everyone assumed was nothing more than a minor cog in the machine. I answered emails, fixed small computer glitches, and attended routine meetings without drawing any extra attention. But behind that calm exterior, I was watching every detail closely. I took notes on odd software logs, unexplained transactions, and any unusual activity on our systems. I knew that these digital clues would be the key to exposing the real crimes committed by Mia Lane and her cronies. As soon as the office lights dimmed, I would return to my secret workstation in a small, hidden corner of the company's server room. With the hum of the servers in the background, I would power up my own set of programs designed to dig deeper into the company's digital records. In that quiet, dimly lit space, I felt a surge of determination. Every keystroke was a step toward justice. I began to download hidden files, uncover encrypted emails, and extract financial data that was never meant to be seen by anyone outside the inner circle of corrupt executives. The night became my battleground. I worked quickly and methodically, sorting through layers of data and uncovering evidence that revealed the full extent of the abuse of power. I discovered secret deals that had been made to siphon money into private accounts. I found proof of falsified documents and irregular transactions that confirmed my suspicions about the rampant fraud in the company. With each file I decrypted, I felt the weight of injustice lift a little, replaced by the power of truth. Living a double life was not easy. By day, I maintained my modest role, never raising suspicion among my colleagues. But by night, I became the hidden hacker, a silent warrior determined to expose every lie. I balanced the mundane tasks of my daytime job with the adrenaline-fueled rush of my covert digital crusade. Often, I would think about how the same hands that fixed minor glitches by day were also powerful enough to bring down an empire by night. It was a strange but fitting duality that I accepted without hesitation. Every piece of evidence I gathered strengthened my resolve. I carefully saved all the files, backed up encrypted copies, and even set up alerts to flag any further signs of corruption. I knew that soon I would have enough proof to force a complete investigation into the company's misdeeds. More importantly, I was preparing myself for the ultimate act of retribution, a final strike that would shake the very foundation of Mia Lane's rule. As I shut down my workstation one late night, I looked around the dim room filled with the quiet hum of servers and whispered promises of justice. I felt a growing certainty. The hidden truths of this company were now in my hands, and nothing could stop me from exposing them. The storm of retribution was building, and I was ready to unleash it. In the shadows of my double life, I had become the silent force that would bring about the downfall of those who had betrayed me. I had been waiting for this day with every ounce of determination in my heart. The shareholders' meeting was set in a grand conference hall, filled with rows of eager investors and high-ranking board members. The room buzzed with anticipation, and at the front, Mia Lane stood ready to present her so-called progress. She wore a confident smile, her voice steady as she began to speak about the measures that had supposedly made the company lean and efficient. The presentation was polished and rehearsed. Mia detailed the new cost-cutting strategies, the removal of dead weight, and the impressive financial numbers that her team claimed were the result of their bold decisions. Her words filled the room, and the investors nodded, some with smiles of approval. For them, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Yet, I sat silently in the back, my mind focused on the digital evidence I had spent countless nights gathering. That evidence, hidden away in secure folders and encrypted files, held the truth of what had really happened behind the scenes. I had uncovered records of fraudulent transactions, secret deals that funneled money into private accounts, and manipulated data that painted a picture of corruption and abuse. Today was the day I would bring that truth into the light. As Mia continued, with her presentation, I felt my pulse quicken. I rose slowly from my seat, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. Every eye in the room turned toward me as I strode confidently toward the stage. The hush that fell over the audience was deafening. I was no longer just the overlooked employee they had dismissed. I was here to reclaim my honor and expose the corruption that had brought us all to this point. I reached the stage and took hold of the remote that controlled the giant screen behind the podium. With deliberate, steady hands, I pressed a few keys. In an instant, the screen flickered and then displayed pages of digital evidence, spreadsheets showing massive discrepancies, email threads outlining secret deals, and transaction logs that revealed the illegal diversion of funds. Every piece of information was there for all to see, clear as day. I began to speak, my voice calm yet forceful. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today not as a disgruntled ex-employee, but as someone who has uncovered the truth. The numbers you see on this screen are not mere figures. They are the hard evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and manipulation that have been hidden behind this company's facade of success. I paused, letting my words sink in. I was fired without severance because I dared to question the very practices that have ruined this company. A murmur ran through the room. Investors exchanged worried glances, and some board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I continued, I once believed in this company and worked tirelessly for its success. Instead, I was cast aside. Today, I present this evidence as a call for justice for everyone who has been wronged by this corrupt system. As I spoke, I could see the shock in the eyes of the audience. Mia Lane's confident posture faltered. Her face turned pale and her hands began to tremble. The giant screen behind me, filled with undeniable facts, left no room for doubt. The presentation of these digital records was the culmination of my quiet crusade, a moment when the hidden truths were forced into the spotlight. In that charged atmosphere, the room's energy shifted. Questions began to fly from investors, and the once unified front of the leadership wavered. Mia tried to regain control, but her voice was lost amid the rising tide of disbelief and anger. I stood there, knowing that this revelation was the turning point, a moment when the battle for justice had truly begun. Every keystroke that had led to this moment echoed in my heart. I had taken my secret power and unleashed it for all to see. The era of corruption was ending, and I was ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The atmosphere in the conference hall was electric. Moments after my grand digital reveal, the air had shifted completely. The irrefutable evidence I had presented on the giant screen left no room for doubt. The investors and board members who had once supported the corrupt leadership now stared in shock. I could feel the tension thickening as the weight of the truth pressed down on everyone present. I watched as the board members, their expressions a mix of disbelief and regret, began to speak in low, urgent whispers. One by one, they looked to one another, as if silently agreeing that something had to be done. It was clear that the evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and manipulation had shattered their trust in Mia Lane and her team. The very foundation of their power was crumbling. In that moment, the board called for an immediate vote. I stood quietly at the front, knowing that this was the turning point we had all been waiting for. The chairperson took his seat and, with a steady voice, announced, "The board, in unanimous decision, hereby votes to remove the current leadership effective immediately." There was no hesitation or debate, just a firm, resolute decision to end the tyranny that had plagued this company. As the words echoed through the hall, I could see Mia Lane's confident posture begin to falter. Her face, once so cold and unyielding, drained of color. The power that had defined her rule was slipping away. In the midst of the uproar, security forces were called in. With a heavy heart, I watched as they moved toward Mia and her key associates. Their once commanding presence was replaced by a look of shock and humiliation as they were escorted out of the room. The scene was both dramatic and poignant. The crowd of investors and employees, who had long suffered under the weight of the corrupt leadership, erupted in a mix of disbelief and vindication. Murmurs of approval and applause began to swell, a clear sign that justice was finally being served. Every step the security guards took with Mia and her team seemed to confirm that their reign of deceit had come to an end. I felt a surge of relief and determination as I witnessed the fall of a tyrant. All the long hours, the quiet nights of careful planning, and the painstaking gathering of evidence had led to this decisive moment. I realized that this was more than just a personal victory. It was a triumph for everyone who had been wronged by the corruption within this company. For years, I had suffered the sting of betrayal and watched as those in power exploited the trust of loyal employees. Today, as I stood there, I saw that the weight of their misdeeds had finally brought them to their knees. The board's decision was a clear message. No one, no matter how powerful, is above accountability. The scales of justice were being balanced, and the time for retribution had arrived. As I took a deep breath, I looked around the room. Faces once marked by fear and resignation now shone with hope and resolve. The removal of Mia Lane and her team was a turning point, a new beginning where fairness and integrity would guide our company once more. I knew that the road ahead would still have challenges, but this moment gave me the strength to continue my fight. In that charged silence, I felt a deep sense of purpose. I had not only reclaimed my dignity, but had also helped to restore the honor of this institution. The tyrant's power had crumbled under the weight of their misdeeds, and now, justice was served. I promised myself that I would work tirelessly to rebuild a company that valued truth, respect, and fairness. And so, as I watched the last of the corrupt executives being led away, I knew that this was not the end, but a new beginning. The fall of a tyrant was only the first step in a long journey towards a brighter, more honest future. After the fall of the corrupt regime, a new sense of purpose began to fill the halls of our company. I stood in the very same boardroom where I had once been dismissed, now empty of the toxic presence that had ruled for so long. Today, I was determined to reclaim what was rightfully mine and restore the company to a place of fairness and transparency. With the ousting of Mia Lane and her cronies, I took my first steps to rebuild. I called a meeting with the remaining loyal employees, those who had endured the old order and still believed in the company's true values. I listened to their concerns and ideas, promising that things would change. I reinstated those who had been unfairly sidelined, and together we began the process of restoring our damaged systems. Every error in the financial records was corrected. Every overlooked detail was re-examined, and slowly, a new structure was put in place. A structure based on honesty and respect. The process was not easy. Days turned into weeks as we worked to repair what had been broken by years of greed and neglect. I spent long hours in the office, reviewing files, meeting with trusted team members, and planning for a future that honored the hard work and dedication of everyone who had suffered under the old regime. I made sure that every decision was made with the company's best interests at heart, and with a promise that transparency would guide our every step. One quiet afternoon, after a particularly long day of meetings and system checks, I felt the need to pause and remember those who had given so much of themselves to this company. I decided to visit a small, peaceful memorial site located just outside the city, a place that had once been sacred to us all. There, I knelt before a modest gravestone dedicated to Tom Hayes, my trusted mentor and friend who had always stood by me. Tom had been more than just a colleague. He was a father figure who had taught me the meaning of loyalty and honor. His memory reminded me of the values that had been lost during those dark times. As I placed a single white rose on his grave, I silently promised to carry his legacy forward. I thought of all the lives that had been hurt by the corrupt practices of the old leadership, and I knew that restoring this company meant healing more than just financial wounds. It meant restoring faith in the idea that hard work and integrity could still win in the end. Returning to the company with a heart filled with renewed purpose, I looked around at the faces of those who were still with me. I saw hope in their eyes, a hope that we could build something better together. There was an air of cautious optimism as the employees began to share ideas and work together in a way that was new, yet deeply familiar. We were no longer divided by fear and mistrust. We were united by a shared vision of fairness and progress. But even as hope began to spread, I could not shake a lingering unease. The path to true renewal was still uncertain, and the scars of the past were slow to heal. There were whispers that not everyone was willing to embrace the change, and that some old habits and resentments might yet resurface. I knew that we had only just begun to clear away the remnants of corruption, and that vigilance would be needed to protect the hard-won gains we had achieved. Despite the uncertainty, I felt confident. I had reclaimed my place on the digital throne, and together with my loyal team, we were building a future that honored the values we all held dear. The company was beginning to heal, and in that healing, there was a promise of a new dawn, a dawn filled with justice, respect, and the hope that one day, every corner of this organization would shine with truth. Just when I thought that order had finally been restored and justice had been served, a chill ran down my spine. I was sitting in my modest office watching the sunrise over the city, a symbol of our fresh start, and for a moment I felt a glimmer of hope. The company was healing, and the loyal team was working hard to rebuild what had been lost. I had reclaimed the digital throne, and everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. But as the morning light crept in, I received a message that shattered that calm. It came in the form of an email with an unfamiliar sender. When I opened it, I found a curious blend of digital code and a handwritten note attached as an image. My heart pounded as I read the cryptic message. Revenge is never truly over. The shadows still hold secrets. Prepare for what comes next. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The message was clear. The corrupt leadership, or at least some remnant of it, wasn't finished with me yet. Every word sent a surge of adrenaline through me. I knew that behind every act of injustice, there was a hidden enemy waiting to strike back. In that moment, I understood that my journey was far from over. The battle for justice had only grown, more complex, and a new challenge was silently taking shape. The email's digital code was interwoven with symbols that looked almost like coordinates or a secret key. I spent a few moments analyzing the data, trying to decipher its meaning. It was as if someone was inviting me to look deeper, a final message left by a vengeful force, or perhaps by someone who had not yet given up on the old ways of corruption. My mind raced as I considered the possibilities. Was this a trap set by a remnant of the old regime? Or was it an entirely new adversary, one with the power and cunning to hide behind layers of code and mystery? I felt a heavy mix of anger, determination, and cautious excitement. The note promised that more challenges lay ahead, a battle that would test every bit of my resolve. I recalled all the nights I had spent gathering evidence, all the long hours I had worked to restore the company's honor. Every step I had taken had led me to this moment, and now I was faced with the possibility that my war for justice might encounter a formidable new enemy. With a deep breath, I saved the message to a secure folder, marking it as urgent. I knew that the next steps would require all the strength, intelligence, and resilience I could muster. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing every detail of the evidence I had collected so far, trying to find any hint that could explain the mysterious note. Every file, every log, and every piece of data was re-examined with a fine-tooth comb. In the quiet of my office, as I prepared to face what lay ahead, I couldn't help but think about the long road that had brought me here. I had been betrayed, fired without a second thought, and forced into a battle that I never expected. I had fought through digital warfare, uncovered deep-rooted corruption, and reclaimed my rightful place. And now, just as hope began to settle, the shadows stirred. Once more, I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, the weight of the new challenge heavy on my shoulders. I knew that I was not alone in this fight. My loyal team and trusted allies had my back. Yet the message left me with an uneasy feeling, a reminder that in the world of power and revenge, peace is only temporary, and the war for justice may always have another chapter. As I prepared to plan my next move, I could only whisper to myself, revenge is never truly over. And with that thought lingering in the silence, I realized that the true battle had only just begun.